sometimes. Sometimes, yeah, the amendment does replace language in the original bill. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is come up with an amendment that's agreeable with the committee and the public outside. And we're working to that goal now.
I'm just
happen a lot. No, it probably doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. You know, and the amendment will replace the language in the bill.
Well, I have a question. Is it possible to do that? Okay. To me, personally, and I've spoken out about it before I was legislator, this frustrates me because we're completely changing what was discussed and we're not allowing the citizens to come and speak on the issue at hand. I just don't believe in hijacking something.
Representative.
My question goes back to your Damico chief. I'm looking at the information requests under number 2, number of violation summons and complaint tickets issued. Is that just by the state police, lieutenant, or is that everywhere in the state?
Those are all cases that were turned over to the Violation Bureau from all agencies.
So in 2010, excessive exhaust noise was only 251 tickets were written.
In aggregate, if you add all the categories, last year there were 390 summonses issued for that 1912, whether it's subsection 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you add them together, they're all for the exhaust.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out what this chart is here. So 251 people were summoned for 1912 subsection 3, excessive noise. 251.
Yes, sir.
And 136 were issued tickets for subsection 1 of leaky exhaust. In the whole state of Maine?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Last year.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Lieutenant Scott, if I may.
I could write that many tickets in Naples.
I could write that many tickets in Kennebunk, but that's not a story.
We're always looking for some good troopers.
I have a question for you, Lieutenant Scott. Out of the 251 tickets that were issued for excessive exhaust noise dealing with motorcycles, were they all successful in court? Do you have any idea what the success rate is in court?
For clarification, those were not all 4 motorcycles.
Okay.
Those are total, whether it's
all vehicles?
All vehicles included. And no, we don't know how many of those had a successful conclusion through the courts. We anecdotally have heard of some successes and we've heard of some failures.
I'm unclear why this is not being enforced more readily. That seems like a very low number to me. And you're the person that represents the state police. I'm going to ask you, what is the problem?
Well, I guess I don't...
Are we giving you enough to work with? Are we not? Or
I think that there are priorities in law enforcement, and as they become known to us from the public by way of things that happened last year, the committee's involvement, people contacting our agency telling us that it's a big concern for them, that makes it a bigger concern for us. We've got to use our resources to do many, many different tasks. We try to do the best we can to respond to citizen complaints. As a result of the efforts last year, law enforcement wrote 28% more violations for defective exhaust than they did in 2009. So we're listening, we're hearing you. We set up special details last year, especially in the areas that were most affected, to include York County. Other police departments have also set up details. There were a lot of warnings that were issued last year to educate members of the riding community, if we're talking about motorcycles, to educate them on the changes and the frustrations that people have been expressing to us. We certainly get that this problem isn't solved. We think that we're being responsive and that we are increasing our enforcement.
Well, I'd like to reiterate again Representative Siebert's comments at the beginning of this committee meeting today. I don't think there's a member of this committee that would disagree with me that this is probably the biggest amount of emails, phone calls, letters, handwritten letters, first class posted sent to my home address addressing this noise issue with motorcycles. And this statistic here is, just shocked me. I just can't believe it. I mean, so I had to ask that question. Now we're giving you the tools that you need as a department statewide, regardless who enforces the law, whether it's state police, local police, county sheriff's departments.
Please don't take my responses as minimizing this, because we do agree that it is an issue. State police has had 96,000 complaints last year. Again, we do the best that we can to respond to each and every one of those. We prioritize them. We're competing with police services for the same road officers that are responding to domestics or to serious personal injury accidents, fatal accidents, thefts, robberies, you name it. We're using that same resource pool to also enforce traffic laws. And when we're enforcing traffic laws, a lot of times we are given complaints of erratic operations, speeding vehicles, those operating under the influence, and they end up taking precedence over other types of nuisance complaints. Now, the complaints are important, but we've got limited resources to work with, and we do try to do the best that we can with the resources that we have.
Thank you for that. Senator Thomas, you have a question.
Well, actually, I kind of wanted to address Representative Ouellette's concerns. And when I look at the titles of these bills, an act to reduce noise pollution from motorcycles, requiring mufflers, an act to curb the noise of motorcycles, I mean, these solutions that we've offered are germane to both bills. And it's a problem, and I've sat on this committee for 7 years. We've had arguments in the hall, and this problem needs to be solved. And at 300 tickets, I mean, one Sunday afternoon in York or Kittery or Kennebunk, and we probably could write that many tickets if you wanted to. So my understanding, Lieutenant Kelly, is that this last sentence that we've offered to take out is one of the big problems, because officers don't want to write the tickets because they won't stand up in court, and some have told me it's because of this last sentence. Would you agree with that?
I will agree, I guess, partially to that, but not in its entirety. I think part of it is if we lack judicial support at times, which there are times that we do, we are probably going to be less inclined to try to enforce a law that is not going to be backed judicially. But we do have some successes with the current statutes, and there are other times that we fall short.
And this will give you some more teeth.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Peebles is next. Go ahead.
Seems to me that when the last time we addressed this and we put into place the louder than the surrounding traffic, we did that basically to see how that worked, because we weren't comfortable at that point with putting in J2825. I think it's time for J2825 now. There's probably going to be it's probably going to be a little bit difficult because there's going to be training involved, and there's obviously going to be equipment involved. But we've reached the point for some of these people in some of these areas, this is more than a nuisance complaint. This rises to the level of torture. It rises to the level of terrorism. And it's just not right. People shouldn't be in their homes feeling terrorized. And it is certainly not the entire writing community. Most of them are sane, civilized human beings. They are being blackened by a few bad apples. But we've got, for their sake, as well as for the sake of the people in these communities, we've got to get the bad apples off the road. Now, the people in these communities have a responsibility, too. They need to go to their town council, their city council, and make sure that their local law enforcement has the resources to do what needs to be done. We can make laws up here until hell freezes over, and if they're not enforced, it's pointless. So I think what the senator has come up with is probably a pretty good way of looking at this, and it's just it is a problem that has to be solved.
Great. You have a question, concern?
Yeah, Karen. Looking at 477 and looking at 1011, which is the next bill we're going to take up, how do these two bills sort of gel? I mean, if we take care of the problem with 477, is it cleaner if we just eliminate 10 to 11, or would you consider them completely separate? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we can look at these two bills sort of as one solution, you know? I think the whole thing about the original EPA piece is all just not a great idea. And then when you look at this 1011, it only addresses without a muffler, but you know, it's pretty limited in its scope. So can we, and I'm opening this up maybe to the committee too, maybe if we deal with this in 477, 1011 is a little more narrower, and it's not, once we do 477, we won't need to deal with 1011 if we do it right. What does the committee think?
I think you're right.
I agree. Just to say it again, you're doing great.
You want to get rid of,
Well, you're pretty close.
I think we're pretty, yeah, they're pretty similar, so I think that's what
okay.
direction we should go.
There is a motion on the floor, correct?
Oh, there is.
For 477, it needs a second. Okay.
Moved and seconded by Senator Diamond. I'm unclear on the motion. I wasn't here.
Okay. Oh, it's basically setting up a similar appeal process. That's not the right defense. In subsection 6, section 1912, subsection 6, there's a defense process for passenger cars and light trucks, and it's setting something up similar for motorcycle, a defense for motorcyclists. And then part of the amendment was sending a letter to agencies to enforce the law, make them aware of the change in the law. And yes, the last sentence, that will need to be, well, it's a technicality, but if you leave the current section 6, you will want to say this subsection applies to motor vehicles as defined in 101 sub 42, and then if you have like a 6A, then you would have this subsection applies to motorcycles as defined, so it's not a complete elimination of that sentence, it's just a variation of it, or amendment of it.
Senator Thomas, you agree with that? Or?
The only thing that I would suggest is that we say this subsection applies to motor vehicles in section 101, subsection 2, then do another sentence that says this subsection applies to, and refer to the standard that so that I want to eliminate this, it does not apply to motorcycles. I want it to be clear that we have a law that applies to motorcycles and that we don't, there's no exception for them. They have to, so that nobody misunderstands that they have to meet noise standards.
Do motor vehicles include motorcycles in the definition? That's why it says except that it does not apply to motorcycles. But if you have the section 6A that says this is the defense for motorcycles, then
all right.
Someone.
Okay. Senator Thomas, you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Willett.
Thank you, Senator Thomas. I guess there's two things I want to address. One, I think Representative Peoples was dead on with her statement she made earlier. There is a noise problem, and we do need to address it. And two, none of these laws matter unless it's a top priority for law enforcement. Those are two facts that I think everyone on this committee can agree on. From my perspective, though, my problem, and the reason why I won't support this bill no matter what, is because and you guys might not understand this because you've been on the committee, but I've never even heard of the J28. I don't know what that standard is. And you're asking me to support something that I haven't even heard of, to vote blindly. People cried out when they voted on the health care bill overnight. They cried out when Congress was doing this. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I was one of those people. And to me, this is a standard that sounds like it's a pretty complex issue that you guys have heard about because you've been on the committee year after year. I haven't heard about this issue, and I'm not going to support it without a proper hearing to allow people to discuss both sides.
Representative Terrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So does this mean that my inspection station will have to have a meter, decibel meter?
it was used similarly to the defense that's currently there for automobiles and for light trucks, then no, it's not a requirement for an inspection. It's only a